Episode number 85 of the Fired Coaches podcast. Excited to get back into the college football world with Chris Reinert. Chris is currently actually with the UFL Dallas Renegades and Coach Rick Neuheisel there. Just came off a season where he was coaching Denzel Mims, Drake Stoops, Tyler Vaughns, Greg Ward, a bunch of talented receivers there in the UFL. So, Chris, really appreciate you taking some time now that the UFL season's done here.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Emmanuel Butler was part of that group too. It was a unique and fun season, something I kind of jumped into really kind of at the 11th hour, but Emmanuel Butler and Tyler Vaughns, two receivers of mine, both tied a UFL record for touchdown receptions in a season. So
wow,
that was pretty cool to have two of them do it. That's unique. And it was a great group. I loved working with those guys. They came to work every day. They were pros. I learned a lot from them as well. But more than anything, they're great people. They were a joy to be around, and they were, it helped me as part of my coaching journey kind of really find a lot of joy in that.
Awesome. So, Chris, tell me about you being a California guy, getting the opportunity to go to Nashville, play at Vanderbilt, have a great experience underneath Bobby Johnson as a wide receiver from 05 to 09. Just kind of kick off how that all kind of started, kind of a college football foundation for you.
Football is a funny game, and football, I started playing tackle football in Atlanta, in Marietta, Georgia, for the Blackwell Bears about a month before I started kindergarten. So I did football before I did school, and it's taken me everywhere, man. I moved to California when I was probably 9 years old, played out here, had, 9 years of tackle football experience before I went to high school, played at Servite, and during the majority of my senior season, I thought I was going to Stanford. And things happened at the end of the recruiting process. I ended up not at Stanford, and I ended up taking a prep school year at Bridgeton Academy in Maine. It was a strange experience, man. You go from Servite High School and doing all the things that you're doing there out to Maine, and it's in the woods, and I didn't know anybody. And, it was at the same time, it was the hardest thing that I've ever done football-wise, but it was also the best thing that ever happened to me, humbled me, taught me how to work. Kind of regrounded who I was as a person, what I was doing football for. And I really learned at a young age, like, if you're really interested in football, you don't really necessarily control your destiny. Football is going to choose where you go, and it's your job to listen or not. And fortunately for me as a player, I listened and played that prep school year out there with Victor Cruz, who was the other receiver across from me. He obviously went on to greater football success player than I did, but had a great time there. Played for Rick Marcella, who's a legend up there in the Northeast, and was able to be fortunate enough to get a spot playing at Vanderbilt after that, and absolutely loved it. It was the perfect spot for me. I had great coaches. It was like you'll never hear this anymore, but I had the same group of coaches on the coaching staff for the entire 5 years I was there, with the exception of two. They made two changes. A D-line coach left at one point to take a promotional position. We brought another one in, and same happened with a running backs coach. But other than that, it was the exact same staff, same head coach, same coordinators, same position coaches, same coaches on all sides. It never happens anymore. 5 years, and football's relationships, right? So I was able to later on kind of extend my coaching career through my position coach in college, who was Charlie Fisher. And those relationships, that's what's really important. That's what lasts.
Yeah, I think it was your junior year, if I'm not mistaken, where you guys went to the bowl game. I believe it was 82 Music City Bowl against Boston College, where it was the first time since 82, excuse me,
Yep.
Where you guys went to Music City Bowl. You beat Boston College. I mean, just talk about that, because obviously what Clark Lea is doing right now at Vanderbilt's amazing, right? But we know, like, historically, right, there were some tough times, but obviously there were some special years as well, too. So just talk about that year in 08 when you guys made the Music City Bowl and got that win.
Clark is an A+ human being. Like, I mean, you want your kids to be as good a human being as that man is. And he is somebody that I genuinely respect. I've known him for a very long time.
You were with him at UCLA, right? He's
the one that got me my first job. He was the connection. He helped me out. So, quick backstory on that. When I got done playing in 2009, so when I was being recruited, Clark was just getting into coaching, so he was kind of helping out in the recruiting office at Vandy. And as I was coming into Vandy, he was taking a job, and he was taking a roll of dice, man, leap of faith. He was moving out to California. He was going to go coach at UCLA. And, I think it was one of those things where it's like, hey, he's kind of working for free and kind of helping out the high school. He just bet on himself. And being that I was from California, that kind of created a mutual connection. And, we kind of stayed in touch throughout that. And then when I got done playing at Vandy, I called Clark. I'm like, hey, I'm ready to coach. Bring me on at UCLA. And he's like, oh, hold on there, buddy. He gave me a phone number of a Vic Umont at Harvard Westlake High School. and said, call this guy, go coach for the season. This was in 2010. If you do a good job, I'll bring you on over here at UCLA if I can. And I went there. I coached defensive backs in 2010, thought I knew everything. I knew nothing. And Clark was true to his word. February of 2011, brought me on at UCLA as a $900 a month intern on Rick Neuheisel's last staff. And UCLA was kind enough to charge me $200 a month to park, but it was a great welcome to football experience as far as big college football. And I'm very, very blessed to have had that experience. But 2008, I went into Vandy. I was a freshman, Jay Cutler's last season, and Jay was an awesome player and an awesome guy for Vandy, and gets a little bit of a tough rap in the media. But I love the guy. I think he's one of those generous human beings who've been around, and he's a great competitor, and he was really, really good to me. But we had a little bit of success there, and then a couple lean years, but you could feel us really building. And then 2008, we got off to a really hot start. I think we started 5-0, and we had college game day there, and we really played well. Finished 6-6, tough sled in the SEC, but we won our bowl game, and that was exciting. Unfortunately, I was not very much a part of it. I broke my leg second game of the season playing South Carolina. So I'd had a catch in the first game of the year. Was feeling pretty good about myself in my role, and we're in the fourth quarter of a Thursday night football game against South Carolina, and I get rolled up from behind and snap my leg in half, and that was my season. And tough. It's just kind of the way that the football goes. And I was fortunate enough to be able to come back and play my senior season, but I was a shell of myself. And at that time I'm probably 23 years old, and that was probably a 27-month healer. It was a compound tib fib, and I was able to play my senior season, but not great, and I didn't really contribute as much as I would have liked to. But it was exciting for Vandy to experience the football success that they did in 2008, and to play whatever small piece that I did in that. But kudos to that coaching staff and all those players and my teammates for doing what they did, because it's something that I don't think people at the time thought was really possible. It wasn't like we were expected to do something like that, but we jumped out. We're 5-0. We beat Auburn, and we're number 12 in the country. I mean, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. You were talking getting connected, coaching high school D-backs for a year. Mm-hmm. And obviously and again, I've said this on the podcast before, I think every college athlete gets done playing and goes into coaching, quickly realizes they don't know as much as they thought they did. But, talk about, I guess I'm really interested from the, you see high school teams all across the country, and, you got varsity coaches, JV and freshman coaches, and you're looking to hire a staff. And if let's say you're in a smaller area and you're trying to put together a staff, and there's obviously not a lot of people that maybe have great deal of high school experience in terms of what they need for these kids to get coached up. Just off the top of your head, is there a position that if you're bringing a guy in, let's say he's excited to do it, but maybe he's green in an area, is there a position that you can put him in as a head coach? And maybe this goes back to you even being a head coach, where you can get a guy who's like, hey, he's really excited, he's really green in this area, but if I put him with this position group, he'll be able to learn on the fly, as opposed to like these other ones, like we can't give to him because obviously it's way too in-depth, if that makes sense.
I think the biggest thing that I learned from both my coaching career and in particular being a head coach is don't worry about fitting people into certain roles. Find the right people. It's less about what people know and more about finding good people. If you can find somebody out there who is reliable, consistent more than anything, consistency is key. Consistency in being able to show up, consistency in being able to execute tasks that you give, consistency in attitude, consistency in just the way that they interact with people. Finding the right human being is far more important than finding somebody who's technically sound. At the end of the day, football is simple. Football is a simple game. People are hard. And I've made countless mistakes in my career, more than I can even get into. But I think one of my biggest mistakes as a head coach, especially initially, was I was so interested in hiring smart people or people that had great skill in their schematics and other things. And what I really learned was it's more about the people. Just find great people, because great people will rise when they're around other great people. And that to me, I think, is the biggest key for anybody out there. Like, there's no perfect candidate anywhere. There's no perfect guy. There's no perfect level of expertise. I think establishing the identity of a football team, establishing the identity of a coaching staff, establishing, this is what we're going to hang our hat on, organizationally, in the weight room, offensively, defensively, and special teams. It's something simple, that kids can, and even this is the same thing in college and the pros. I mean, if you can just find the simple things that you can hang your hat on, and you know that that's your identity, and then you can find people who can get behind that and reiterate what you're, look, then you'll be in great shape.
Yeah. Let's work backwards a little bit here because we are talking about you, being a head high school football coach, and you were at your alma mater, like you mentioned, Servite before. You were the head high school football coach there before being in the UFL now most recently. And, getting that head coaching role, obviously having a lot of years as a college assistant, you were in the AAF as well too. Like coming to that head coaching role, what did you feel you were really prepared for? Or maybe things that maybe tripped you up? Like you just kind of mentioned, like, just finding the right people and hanging your hat on stuff. But was there anything that you came into it where you were like maybe blindsided by or weren't as prepared for as you thought you'd be?
I think I was really well prepared organizationally. I was really well prepared from the standpoint of practice planning or planning out a calendar, right? Over the course of the year, like during this phase of the year, we're going to focus on this. This phase of the year, we're going to focus on this. I was really good at understanding what we needed to accomplish in the weight room or from a conditioning standpoint. I was really good at understanding how we needed to install. Look, I've been lucky. I've coached offense, defense, and special teams. I've been a position coach, a coordinator, and a head coach. I've like covered every freaking base. But I was really good at all of that stuff. I was woefully underprepared, in particular at the high school level, for all of the other stuff that goes along with that type of a position. And ultimately, it's kind of what drove me out of it. I think had I gone right into high school and stayed in high school forever, I'd be more well prepared and understand how to deal with it. But having been a college coach for as long as I was, and that's how I cut my teeth, and that's how I learned to coach, there's so much of what you do is tailored towards the football, and the pieces that are there playing in a lot of ways become cogs in a machine. You see even more nowadays, like with the way the transfer. Look, you're not developing rosters anymore, right? You're hiring mercenaries for the most part. They're plug and play, and then they move on. There's how many guys out there. I mean, there's a study like how many different places have their head coach, their offensive coordinator, and their starting quarterback coming back, and it's like a dozen in the whole country, right? It's something small. Don't quote me on that number.
Yeah,
but
it's true.
It's something small. So that was the world that I kind of had been in, and then you get into this world, and I grew the program from about 80 kids when I got there to about 160 at the end, and with 160 kids and 2 parents for each of them, that's 480 people who you're directly impacting on a day-to-day basis. And then you combine, administrators, your other coaches, prominent alumni, friends of the program,
all that stuff,
media.
right? Yeah.
There's 600 people on a daily basis who have direct access to you 24/7, 365. And really the only thing that they're bringing to you for like 98% of it is grievances or problems or issues or things that they would like different. And I couldn't separate that. I couldn't sit there and say, I can turn this on and I can separate myself from it and I can solve a problem. Somebody else's problem became my problem. And when I did that, I became less of a father and less of a husband than I needed to be. And that's ultimately why I walked away from that job. I loved Servite High School. I loved coaching high school football. There's a lot of what we did that I'm really proud of. I think we left some meat on the bone in some places where I think we could have been a little bit better. But ultimately, I kind of fell out of alignment with our administration about kind of what direction we were going in. And I could not do a good job of balancing and in some ways delegating a lot of the day-to-day firefighting, if you will, that goes on when you're the ultimate person in charge of so many different entities who rely on you to kind of get where they're going, whatever that is, be it you're chasing a D1 scholarship, or you're chasing a starting position, or you're chasing a role on the team, or you're just chasing a diploma, or you're just trying to become a better human being. Some of the stuff that I got calls on, kind of tore me up. Honestly, a lot of it was stuff that I couldn't really resolve, but it's like, people are entrusting you with this information or telling you things about their personal lives or the lives of their kids, or in some cases their marriages and other things. And I'm like,
Right.
I didn't do a good job of emotionally understanding how to deal with that. And that's ultimately kind of where I fell out of that, because it spilled into my home life, and now I'm carrying that.
Right.
I could never turn it off. We go on vacation and I'm sitting there on my phone all day. My phone's pinging all day, and it's tough. The life of a high school football coach is, I mean, it is yeoman's work, and it is, I am so appreciative of the guys who do it well. and have done it for a long time and can understand how to do that, because I struggled with that.
Talk about your entry into college football. Again, you're kind of making that connection to where you get to UCLA. You're an intern. Rick Neuheisel. You start, technically working underneath him. Obviously, as the head coach at that time. You then spend time in two different organizations with the AAF, which I'm interested to hear about that season. How you guys were off to a good start there, and obviously everything went kaput. And then obviously most recently on the UFL this year. So, what has Coach Neuheisel meant to you just as somebody that you look up to, as somebody who's run college programs at a highly successful level, but also dabbled into, the semi-pro or pro or whatever you want to call it in terms of the AAF and the UFL now?
Rick's the absolute best, man. He is the best guy in the world to be around. He's an A+ human being. He's a savant as a football mind. He's been highly successful wherever he's been. He's a pleasure to be around. Like you hear him talk like that. I worked from 3 separate times. I can't say no. He's a damn good recruiter,
Is he as good of a country music player as he leads on to be with his guitar?
The guy is, if he picks up anything, he's going to be talented at it, man. He can sing, he can play the guitar, he's a scratch golfer, like he's a great football coach. Like competitive as all get out. He's a dude's dude. I love working for him. He's awesome. And he gave me my first opportunity back in 2011. Unfortunately, as it is, we're all on this podcast because at some point or another, or in my case, many different times, we didn't win enough football games, and it was a tough situation because because USC was not eligible, they were on probation, but we played in the Pac-12 championship that game that year, and he had been let go, but he had done a great job of recruiting and did some really good things there at UCLA. And I was fortunate enough to be able to stick around there after he got let go in 2011 and work with Jim Mora, who probably of all the coaches I've worked for, he probably had the most tangible impact on my career. He is, you want to talk about a detail-oriented guy that is literally an encyclopedia of football knowledge and situational awareness and how to do things and how to teach and structure and discipline. You can't find anybody better. And I was fortunate to work with Coach Mora twice. I worked for him in 12 and 13. My GA expired at the end of 13 and left there, and then went to go coach for Mike Leach, which was a whole different way of doing things. But man, unbelievable person, unbelievable mind, totally opposite of you go from Jim Mora to Mike Leach. You are talking polar opposites. Yet I won 10 games with each of them. Right. And so there's different ways to skin the cat. There's different ways to operate. And I think the biggest thing for me, and it goes back to what I was talking about identity earlier, Jim Mora knew who he was and still does. He knows who he is, and he is true to himself. He coaches that way. His successes and flaws and all, whatever like we all have, he is true to himself. And that has bred him a lot of success. Mike Leach, the exact same thing. True to himself. Successes and flaws and all. True to himself. You always knew what you were going to get. Very consistent. And I think consistency breeds success. And both of those guys are great examples of it. I was a GA on the defensive side of the ball in 1 year for Mike Leach, and then a GA on the offensive side of the ball my last year, so I'm moving all over the place. And then I go back to work for Jim Mora in 2016. And I'm coaching the special teams, so covering all these different bases. But I worked for Coach Mora for 4 years in 2 separate 2-year stints. And then, obviously 2017 didn't win enough games. We went 6-6, and it just wasn't good enough. And we got let go, and I was out, and Rick Neuheisel saved my career again, right? Comes in and gave me a start, and then he saves my career, right? I'm out. I'm looking for a job. I'm struggling. And he calls and says, "Hey, there's this new spring professional league that's going to start called the Alliance of American Football League. I'd love for you to be a part of it." And I said, "Sign me up." And went to work on that. We did, quite a bit of pre-work for that league, if you will. I think Rick called me in March, and I think we reported in January. So I spent 2018 doing a lot of prep work for him, for our staff, for our team. And then, we got to work in January of 2019 on that league. We were able to play 8 games, and unfortunately the financial backing of the league was, let's call it, shaky ground, and we didn't make it very long, but it was the most fun I ever had coaching. It was an extremely rewarding experience. There's something about working with that group of athletes. You're at the time, because this is pre-COVID and this is pre-transfer portal, so our players were a little bit younger. They were probably 23, 24, 25 years old was about what we were getting. but they've been humbled, right? They're no longer in the NFL, or they're chasing that dream. They're trying to get back. They're grown men. They've got young families, and they were hungry and they were eager, and they took coaching really, really well, and they were pros. And there was something about that collaboration and the way that we worked that was really rewarding for me as a coach. And I loved it. And we did really, really well. And I'll tell you, and the Spurrier family will fight us, but I think that the Arizona Hotshots were champions of that 19 AAF by virtue of our victory over the Orlando Apollos. But they did have a better record. They were 7-1. It's kind of the world back around, right? Like Steve Spurrier was head coach of the Orlando team, and his son Scotty Spurrier was a special teams coordinator, tight ends coach for that Orlando team. And then I circle all the way back around to this UFL thing, and I'm at the Dallas Renegades, and there's Scotty Spurrier. He's the special teams coach and the tight ends coach. He also coached running backs for us on the Dallas Renegades. And, so we had that kind of shared experience, but, I loved that. And then, so that league falls under, and now I'm like, dude, where do I go? And Charlie Fisher, a receivers coach that I played for in college, was at Arizona State, and my wife and I were in Arizona, having coached for that Hot Shots team. And, I called Coach Fisher, just kind of like looking for advice. He's like, hey, you want to come down and just kind of help us out? And I was like, sure. And I got hooked up with Sean Slocum. And Sean Slocum, like, you got the Packers jersey back there. Sean Slocum was teams coordinator for the Green Bay Packers for 10 years. It's unfortunate that they remember the way that he went out from there more than they do how good he did for those 10 years with Coach McCarthy and all the success that they had. And I learned more about special teams from him, and I incorporate a ton of that. Like, he was awesome. The absolute man, the man. So I helped him out for the 2019 season. If you look back on that Arizona State team, you had Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
You had Brent Ayuk.
Ricky Pearsall, right?
Ricky Pearsall. A guy that I coached in the UFL, Curtis Hodges, was on that team. Frank Darby, who was playing still for the Seattle Battlehawks, or St. Louis Battlehawks, was on that team. So really cool experience. Herm Edwards, Antonio Pierce. Again, I've been around guys that have been to the mountaintop and have done really great things. I've been really fortunate in that regard. And while I was doing that, because I was a volunteer position, I took a job at Pro Football Focus and did data analytics with Pro Football Focus in the 2019 season. And then got my real kind of a big break coaching wise right before COVID, maybe like days before COVID hit. And I got the special teams job at Colorado working for Carl Durrell.
So, I mean, there's obviously a lot to unpack. And what I found interesting in kind of researching your career is, I mean, you might be a unicorn in that you won 3 Sun Bowls at 3 different institutions.
I'm a king of El Paso.
Which, tell me about the Sun Bowl, because I mean, I've always watched the Sun Bowl on TV, and to me, that seems like an awesome sight to watch a bowl game. But, I think there's so many different things. It's like, you've worked for Jim Mora, you've worked for Herm Edwards, guys who were NFL guys who were in the college level, obviously Mike Leach, and we could probably do a 2-hour podcast on that alone. But then and then also, I mean, what I found interesting too is, when Coach Mora gets let go and Coach Fish takes over, same thing that happens at Colorado, when Coach Terrell gets let go and Mike Sanford takes over, those guys both win their first game as interim. And it's like, I don't know how many times you see that where an interim takes over, and you've been a part of, so there's so many different things we could talk about here. But I guess going back to those Sun Bowls, like, just the experience of witnessing the same bowl 3 times at 3 different institutions, I think is pretty unique that way.
I got 2 things on the Sun Bowl. Number one, nobody cares more about the bowl game that they host than the people of El Paso and the people at the Sun Bowl. They do a tremendous job. They put on a great show. It's well organized. It's a pleasure to be around. I had a great experience with all 3 of them. It was awesome. The wildest thing about the Sun Bowl is I've played one in sweltering heat, one in like a bunch of wind, and then one in a blizzard. When we were at Washington State, we played Miami.
I was going to ask you if that was the one, because I remember the one time it was covered in snow. I didn't know if that was the game or not.
It was beautiful weather the whole week, and then we get this like snow, this weather system coming in, and it wasn't there at the kickoff of the game, and it started rolling in about the midway through the second quarter, and then by like halftime, I mean, it is coming down. I mean, it is dumping. And we got really lucky to get out after the game. So everybody was kind of flying back home after the game. I was flying back to Southern California. I was able to get out. My mom, who came into the town for the game, I was going down to San Diego because my girlfriend at the time was living there. So I was going down to see her. My mom was flying back into like LA. She didn't get out. She got stuck there for like 2 more days.
Wow.
But it was wild experience as far as just the violence of that blizzard coming down there. But yeah, 3-0. 3 different Sun Bowls, beating Virginia Tech, Miami, and Florida State, kind of a who's who of college football with Arizona State, Washington State, and UCLA, and have had a great time with all 3 of them. And It's a great bowl game. They do a really, really good job there.
You were talking about Coach Mora and just how organized everything was, right? And I remember when Herman Edwards took over at Arizona State, it was all about kind of bringing an NFL model to college football. And that was actually before really the portal got crazy going and NIL and all that stuff. So obviously there's a lot of structure and organization there. But then Mike Leach, everything that's obviously been portrayed about him, right, is it's so simplistic, whether it's the call sheet or, the QB meetings. I remember reading the Athletic article, and maybe that's when you were on the GA side. There are certain quarterbacks in that room where he's like, well, why didn't you throw it to this guy? And he's like, well, this is what I was doing. He's like, no, he's open. Just throw it to him.
That's the
And,
coaching.
was it just, like in terms of obviously you're kind of talking about how different it was and everybody says how different it is it just that it's simplistic and it's just like, do this? Or is it just because it's so unlike any other coaching experience you can get at the college level anywhere else?
Well, I'll share some Mike Leach knowledge here. Mike Leach gave more autonomy to his quarterbacks at the line of scrimmage than anybody I've ever been around. Mike Leach didn't call run plays. Runs were always checks, right? So if you're a quarterback in a Mike Leach offense, you're walking the line of scrimmage, and during the course of the week, we'd kind of coach you on what you want, right? Whether it's we're going to run at a particular shade or we're going to run at a particular number in the box, whatever it was, and which scheme we were going to use, because we were limited. We ran like inside zone, we ran a lead zone out of two back, and we ran like a fold scheme, right? So in any given week, the game planning on the run game was if this, then this. If you get a 5-man box, run this. Or if you get the shade here, run this. One of those types of things, right? But that was like at the quarterback at the beginning of every play is coming to the line. That's what he's evaluating, right? Okay, can I run the ball? Now, if you can't run the ball, the second thing you're going to do is you're going to look to the outside. And if they're not going to press the receivers, we're just going to take the now screen. Just throw it out there, right? Throw it out there until they stop it, right? So, because that's not on the call sheet either. So you're going to come to the line of scrimmage, you're going to check for the run based off what we had told you. Now you're going to look to the outside and you're going to check to see, okay, if we tell you, hey, he's pressed, then you can go back to the play call. But if he's not, throw the now screen out there, right? So signal out, throw the now screen. Then you're going to progress to what's on the wristband. And the wristband's going to carry, sometimes it carries one call, but within the structure of the base offense, there might be 2 or 3 calls on there, whether it be like a drop back or a quick game. It's going to be like 2 or 3 different quick games or 2 or 3 separate drop backs. Now the quarterback's going to look out and he's going to evaluate the defense. And this was where Leach gets really simple, right? Evaluate the grass. It's real estate. Where do you have the most real estate? Play to that real estate. What of those routes that are on that wristband attack that area of grass that is most exposed? Call that play and throw the ball there. It was that.
So is it, again, because obviously college football coaches don't do that. Is it a control thing? Just being able to give up and empower or what is it? Because again, it's been shown so many times, right, that it is that simplistic as you just mentioned and detailed. But there's so few people, I feel like, actually want to take that step to empower people or go about that way.
For the longest time, you go through Leach's history of quarterbacks going back to even before Texas Tech, even when he was like Oklahoma or Kentucky or whatever, but through Texas Tech and through Washington State, it was like the guy that took over, the next guy was really always in his 3rd or 4th year in the program, right? So he'd been practicing, he'd been doing it. The offense doesn't change, right? It's the same structure. It's the same play calls. The practice scripts are the same. You dust off the exact same scripts year after year, spring after spring, fall after fall. It's the same thing. And so you get comfortable with operating that system and you know exactly where the ball needs to be going because it's, you're just moving the ball, right? It's like the Spurs in the heyday with Ginobili and Parker where it's just moving the ball, right? That's all it is. You're just moving the ball quick. So a lot of that's kind of gone out the window with the way that college football has evolved. And now, especially with the quarterbacks, right? You're not playing in a year, you're transferring, right? You look at, there's quarterbacks out there that have been in like 6 schools, it's crazy. But then the other thing is, and you said the word, there's for a lot of guys, there's a fear of empowering somebody, a young person, to have that much control. And that was probably the beauty of Mike Leach is, and it extended to the coaching staff that way too. Mike Leach was not afraid to delegate. Mike Leach was the best delegator I've ever been around. Mike Leach empowered people more than anybody I've ever been around. And it's probably part of his legacy that doesn't get talked about enough. But the proof is in the pudding when you look at his tree and look at how many guys who worked for him or worked with him have gone on to tremendous success. And a lot of it has to do with how much he empowered so many people when they were in roles that generally didn't get empowered. I was a GA for him, and he had me in charge of a lot of game management situations. I was a GA. I don't know if you've ever seen the meme of the go for 2 guy, but I was the go for 2 guy. We were playing up at Oregon in 2015, and we're down 2 scores with about 6 minutes to go, and we come roaring back, and we score a touchdown, I think to make it like 31-30 with about, I don't know, 20 seconds to go. And I'm in his face. Go for two, go for two, go for two. He like looks up at the scoreboard, looks in the sky, go for one, kick it. And then we end up winning in overtime. And we won 45-38. He had a better feel for it than I did. He's the boss. He made the right decision.
Yeah.
But I was a meme for a little while. I mean, I'm like adamant, like go for two.
Yeah.
We're on the road. We'd come back. We were big underdogs, but he empowered people. He empowered people to do things that others, maybe would be too fearful of or whatever. But that was the beauty of Mike Leach.
No, and I love your point too, because it's true, right? Especially, I mean, like you said, Texas Tech, Washington State, it was, Kingsbury to, I think, BJ Simons, and then Sonny Cumbie, and then Graham Harrell. And it's like each year the guy, but like you said, they've been around the program. They know what's going on. It's like the guy the year after does better than the guy the year before. And it just keep outdoing themselves, right? But like you said, there was that consistency within that program where, like you said, it's the same script, but you're getting so many reps. And it's just, I'd listened to a podcast recently with Sonny Cumbie just talking about that too, being the guy, 3 behind, but just seeing what everybody was doing and still getting all those reps and understanding that. Shifting to, again, mentioned we're at UCLA with Coach Mora, at Colorado with Coach Terrell, where, you go through those shifting of the staffs during the year, right? Where there's still games to be played. But there's still like a team to be coached, right? There's still games to be played. What did you learn in those 2 instances being a part of those staffs where it was like, we got a sudden shakeup, the leader up top is no longer, and now somebody else is running the rest of the ship for the rest of the year. Like, just from keeping guys in tune, like obviously guys taking elevation roles on staffs, I'm sure. Like, what did you see in those 2 instances, with interim coaches at UCLA and Colorado?
2 totally different experiences with it, but both that had a lot of positive, even in a difficult situation. So 2017, we're 5-5, and we go on the road to play USC. It's Josh Rosen versus Sam Darnold, a big time game, and unfortunately we fall short. I don't know, 28-24 or something like that, and they let Coach Mora go that night. We're 5-6, and Jed Fish, who'd been hired that year to be the offensive coordinator, and he'd been doing a really good job. Josh Rosen had his best year. Jordan Lasley was having a great year as a receiver. Caleb Wilson, we were doing some really good things. We had a good offensive line up front. Jed Fish takes over, and from the moment that guy sat in that number 1 seat, I was like, oh my God. I think I came home and told my wife, I was like, this dude's going to be a stud. This guy is going to be it. Like, you just could feel it. You just knew it, right? And we put together a great game plan. We came back the next week and we played Cal at the Rose Bowl. We needed a win to become bowl eligible. And JJ Molson knocked through a game-winning field goal, a walk-off field goal to win the game. Proud moment for me as I was coaching the special teams those 2 years. And we ended up going to a bowl game. We had some stuff going on in the lead up to the bowl game, as far as, guys maybe not participating and things of that nature, normal stuff. It had started to become in vogue at that time. But we put together a great plan. We approached it like pros, kept everybody that was still in the ship together, played a competitive game, even though we were, a little bit outmanned against Kansas State. And, that was, I can't remember if that was Coach Snyder's last game or not, but it was around about the end for him, but came up short. But Coach Fish was phenomenal. Like, I mean, when it was like, look, we're not going to redo everything, but this was not like a death march, right? He came in and he was competing for that full-time job, and ultimately he didn't get it. They hired, Coach Kelly, who, had his successes there too. And he's a tremendous football coach. And my relationship with him has actually grown a ton since then, based on, being at Servite and him coming through and all those things. But Coach Fish, you just knew. Like, and obviously it's no surprise that he's gone on to the success that he's had and he's going to continue to have. Fast forward, go to 2022. The Colorado experience was a bit unique. 2020, the first year there with Coach Terrell, the COVID year, Carl Terrell's Pac-12 Coach of the Year. We started off 4-0. We're beating Utah at halftime in our last regular season game of the year, and kind of fall apart there a little bit at the end. They beat us. We go 4-1. We go to the Alamo Bowl, and everybody else in America would have opted out of playing in that game, but we got hit with a bunch of positive COVID tests, and we played that game with 47 players.
Wow! And
everybody else would have opted out. But kudos to Carl Terrell. Kudos to Colorado. We played that game with, I mean, like I'm a special teams guy, right? And the special teams managing depth charts on game day or lead up to it is, the biggest cause of, the balding spot that I go on the top of my head. And it's the day of the game, and we're trying to figure out on the bus to the game, like, who we still have.
Who can actually play, yeah.
We don't know, and we managed to go out there, and we got thumped pretty good by Texas. and Sam Ellinger and that crew. But we played, and so we were 4-2. It was a positive season. And then we came back the next year and probably fell a little bit short of expectations. We had a quarterback injury in fall camp, which was, devastating for us. And we went 4-8, but we played our best ball in November and kind of led us to thinking that we had some positive momentum going. And then this is right when NIL and the transfer portal all start to hit. And at Colorado, we were not prepared for that. We weren't prepared for what that was going to look like. We weren't prepared for getting transfers in. We weren't prepared for the financial element of it. And we lost a handful of NFL draft picks. Christian Gonzalez walks out of the building. Brendan Rice walks out of the building. Jarek Broussard, who was the Pac-12 Player of the Year in 2020, walks out of the building. Mekhi Blackman, who's an NFL pick of the Minnesota Vikings, walks out of the building. Mark Perry, who ended up starting on TCU's national championship runner-up team, walks out of the building. I mean, so we have this exodus of players for at the time. I mean, you're talking like mid 5 figures. It's not like it is right now. I mean, but we weren't prepared for it. We didn't know. And so we go into that 2022 season and we tried to replace a lot of, elder talent and older guys who we've been developing with freshmen, and we got rolled. And so we're 0-5. It's October 1st and we're flying back from Arizona, and you kind of just knew. And unfortunately that Sunday morning, they let Coach Terrell go. And, everybody in that building knew that we were, going to a gunfight with knives, I mean, we were too young and it was tough. But here comes Mike Sanford. And again, I've been blessed to be around so many great people, and Mike Sanford, another A+ human being. And Mike Sanford comes in and he is the most positive, uplifting, about the people guy that you could ever be around. And in that 2 weeks where we had a bye and then we're going into play Cal at home and it's homecoming, he convinced everybody in that building that we are going to win that game. And by God, we did. And it was not easy. And, it was an overtime game and we had to have some fortunate breaks. But I remember when we won that game and they rushed the field and we celebrated, it was like you won the national championship game. But it was hard being 0-5 and being in that situation. We won, and we reverted back to the mean a little bit there over the course of the last couple months of the season. But to go from October 1st all the way through end of November, early December, and kind of that dead man's walking kind of territory. Kudos to Mike Sanford, because he kept everybody together. He kept the staff together. He kept the team together. Nobody bickered. Nobody quit. Nobody fought. We battled. We had fight as a team. We didn't have infighting, but we fought to battle. And we weren't a very good football team, but we represented ourselves the way that we should. And that's a credit to Mike. That's a credit to his attitude and the way he approached it. And everybody was a pro, because it would have been very, very easy for everybody to just, start locker room lawyering, for coaches to start looking for their next opportunity to kind of check out and do the bare minimum. And instead, you had a bunch of guys that really rallied and worked hard, and the situation didn't change the way that we start business. And a lot of that too was a credit to Carl. Coach Terrell did a great job of bringing great people into the building. It just, unfortunately, we just weren't prepared kind of for the ever-changing landscape of college football, and that's life. That's tough. But
and there's still some institutions that I feel like, obviously we're a few years into it, that still aren't, right? They're still trying to figure it out. And, it's obviously there's not a blueprint out there on how to figure it out. It's ever changing that way. Obviously in all that you've learned, and you talked about being in the UFL and obviously your time in the AAF and really enjoying kind of working with those guys where it's all football, right? Like the college scene's over, NFL dream might not be there yet. Maybe it was, maybe I'm back in this league. How do you get better in kind of the off season and kind of what you're doing, just as a leader or coach to kind of better yourself in the off season?
It's funny you should ask that. There's a couple of things. One, I think the biggest thing for me is maintaining relationships. And I think that as I've gone through this, I've been, and I can look in the mirror right now as someone that's been in this now, I don't know, 17 years or something like that. And I'm still relatively young in my journey, right? But I can look back and I can say, I've been conveniently committed to relationships, be it coach to player or coach to coach, whatever it is. Those are the most important things, right? Like everybody in this profession is always kind of looking, gearing for that. And until you get one of those mountaintop jobs, right? Everyone's looking for those like the next step to it, right? And the truth of the matter is the only people that are hiring you are people that you know. It's people that, are in a position to be able to hire you, but people that have been around you before. because that's
And know your work and know your ethic and everything else, right? I mean,
the character of the man, right? It's the character of the human being. Like that's really what it's about. What it's about is the character of who you are and not what you know. Everybody knows stuff, right? It's more about can this person, do I want to go to work with this guy every day, right? Like it's as simple as that. So I think maintaining and working on relationships and tapping in with my guys that I coach at the UFL, tapping in with coaches that I know. And it's not like, hey, do you have a job available? It's just like, hey, how are you guys doing? How are you looking for this year? As simple as that. And whether I coach 25 more years of football or I don't coach another down in my life, I mean, I've been really blessed to be around a lot of great people. I've been really blessed to learn a lot from the game. I've been blessed to, kind of live my dream. I was a squatty little white guy that was able to play in the SEC, and I've coached all across college football. I've coached high school. I've coached pro, been a head coach, coordinator position. Really lucky. But the other thing I'm working on, I got to share this with you, is in conjunction with Noel Mazzoni, and his son Gray, and Xavier Suafilo, who played in the NFL and played at UCLA, who I was at UCLA when he was an offensive lineman, and then he was our offensive line coach for the Renegades, and an automation engineer who's also a high school football coach in Massachusetts named Alex Milano. We've been working on developing a platform called GameplnIQ, which is a software that can take your breakdown data, effectively whatever you put into Huddle or Exos, whatever it is that you want to use. And by filling in the proper columns, right, basic breakdown stuff, the stuff that you would normally do, it can automate scouting reports for you and spit back actual presentations. And with that, we also have the ability to do depth charts and calendars and playbook drawings and all these other things. But we also have the ability to automate the playbook. So we've got automation moving after you've built a drawing. But we've done a bunch of different stuff. So we're working on that product right now, and we're kind of in the beta testing mode of that. But it's pretty cool. If you can sit there and take this data set, put it in, and then we've taught this algorithm to be able to spit back out actual scouting reports and actual data and tendency charts. And then it can review your self-scout and review your opponent. It can cross-reference data about how certain plays do against their defenses, and they can recommend you play calls in your terminology.
that's awesome. I mean, obviously the AI movement, right, is crazy, but I think anytime that you can start simplifying and getting rid of some of these extra steps, right? Like you mentioned, here's all your breakdown data from Huddle. Well, now instead of going and typing up a whole scouting report or using whatever system you got, if you can just automate this stuff, right? I mean, I think that's the exciting thing about AI is just a lot of this manual work. And you talk about high school, we were talking earlier, right, with high school staffs and budgets and all that, where it's like maybe you don't have the manpower to do what you need to, but if you can pay a little bit of money and have stuff act as a person who's going to be kind of your operations guy per se, I mean, this is awesome stuff.
Yeah, it's in effect, really, it's an app for coaches or a website for coaches, whichever way you want to use it. And we pitched it to a Power 4 college team a couple weeks ago. And really, one of the main sells of this is it effectively eliminates 8 hours of manual tedious labor between for them, like would be Sunday and Monday morning. Right. You can take whatever. Now you still have to do your breakdowns. Right. Now, whether you use Huddle Assist or you do it on your own, the more detailed you are and more organized you are with the way that you input the data, this is going to take that data and instantaneously it's going to spit out every single tendency chart that you could ever want. It's going to show you all of the different graphs and tools and things, and it can do it in a way that you can read and look at, like on a template for a computer, but it also has the ability to offload in a presentation mode that you can actually present these to players in meetings. But it's allowing you to kind of get the picture painted for you ahead of watching and evaluating the tape, like kind of what's happening. And now you can use this to guide the way that you game plan. And
That's
that's
awesome.
really what it is.
What's the name of it again?
GameplnIQ.
Okay.
GameplnIQ.com.
Nice.
And it's getting ready to go live. It's something that we want coaches to have access to and be able to use as a tool to kind of help in that process of developing scouting reports and doing that. Because like I know this from being at the high school level and even at a place like Servite, which has resources and it's big time high school football. Like I didn't have a bunch of people to be able to do all of that stuff. Anything that I wanted to get done, I mean, it's fallen on 2 or 3 hands, and it's just not enough. So if you're doing the work to break down the data, if you're doing the work to put in data on the game, which I imagine most people are to some degree, and even if not, Huddle Assist can still help you out, and you can punch that in, then you can have scouting reports, and you can have tendency charts, and you can have all of the different breakdowns about where people are attacking in a whole bunch of different ways. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So our team's done a really good job with developing that.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure to share that in the notes here. And Chris, I can't appreciate you enough jumping on. Obviously, I think, like I said, your story is super unique, and some of the things, whether it's Sun Bowl or interims or just the different stuff, like you mentioned, right? You're an offense, you're a defense, you're a special teams guy. Just I think you're a unicorn in that way, which is awesome, right? You've seen a lot of different things from different perspectives. So really appreciate you taking some time and just sitting down here on the pod.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. I appreciate you having me on. And, for all those coaches out there, man, just keep fighting, keep swinging, just remember why you're in it in the first place. And hopefully your heart's in it for the right reasons and impacting people through the game of football in a positive and uplifting fashion. That's what I got into it for. And it's such a unique game. And, it really has the ability to uplift lives and teach great life lessons. And that's why I'm in it.